So thank you, everybody. Good morning or afternoon, depending on what part of the world you're logged in from. Thank you so much for joining us. This idea of CPR for CRM started about 9 years ago. I was in a boardroom of a company, about $185 million company that had two primary lines of business, and the EVP for each of those two business lines sat in the boardroom along with the CEO, who was very frustrated, and with their CFO. One of the EVPs, we'll call her Jane, had been successfully growing her smaller business unit and credited a lot of her ability to manage that to the CRM system that they were using. The other EVP, using the same CRM system, they were on the same system. Joe, he's actually managing a larger business unit, but he felt that their CRM solution wasn't working properly. And I'm going to pause for one moment here and ask if everyone can hear me okay. I'm getting some hiss and feedback.
Yeah, I'm getting some feedback on the line, Jeff. I'm not sure what changed. And that sounds good now if you're still there with us.
Yep, okay, I'm still here. So we'll proceed. So the CEO was looking for answers. It was an uncomfortable meeting, and the CEO was looking for some answers. It was a rare situation for us because most of the variables were the same. There were two different business units using the same system, very similar processes, very similar types of businesses that they were in. So if anyone had the advantage, it should have been Joe, because more of his team's needs had been addressed in CRM than Jane's. So 50% of their business was succeeding with CRM and 50% was failing. And those are about the rates we typically see. About half of CRM projects actually do fail, depending on your definition of failure. So that particular company was about to make a horrible misstep that would ultimately bring both business units into a state of failure. And we see that kind of scenario played out again and again in the marketplace. So we're going to come back to that story later, but for now, let's proceed to get into the meat of what we're going to talk about today. So what we're going to look at is the story behind that story. What makes a difference between success and failure with CRM projects? And it's based on 10 years of research. CRM has a tremendous amount of potential, but almost no one is talking about the failure rates that exist out there right now, and that's too bad, because if you understand it, you can often prevent it. So we're going to talk about some of the real statistics behind CRM. We're going to look at some of the actual causes of failure, and we're going to look at a 5-point recovery plan to help individuals who are either starting CRM and want to avoid failure, or maybe are involved in a CRM project that isn't doing well, and what they can look at to hopefully recover a bit. So a brief word about me. I've been in the CRM industry for about 25 years. I authored the Dynamic CRM Bible, Salesforce.com video training series for sales and sales managers, and have another forthcoming, more strategic book on CRM that will come out this winter. And I manage C5 Insight. It's a 13-year-old CRM consultancy and collaboration company. So enough about me. What I'd really like to do is encourage everybody who's here today to participate with us socially. Take notes, share your insights, kind of pay it forward. It's a complimentary webinar. Put some of the things out there that you're learning, and you can see the hashtag CPR for CRM is right there. So use that, and if you do use that, on the left-hand side of the screen, you're going to see whatever it is that you post to Twitter is going to show up over there as well. And if it's questions, we'll certainly try to address those. You can also use the standard GoToWebinar features to submit questions to Allison, and at the end, she'll come back and ask those. What I'd like to do also is to get to know you a little bit better. So, Allison, if you can pull up our first poll, I'd like to ask you, why is it that you're here today? Just a couple of answers on this poll, but is it because you're experiencing CRM problems yourself, or are you more looking to avoid problems? So you're kind of in a state of failure where you'd like to, where you're trying to figure out, well, how can we kind of dig ourselves out? How can we find our way out of this maze that we're in? Or are you more curious about how can I potentially avoid failure? And if you're not sure, then that probably means you're not in a failure state, so either choose a second answer or don't answer at all, but I'd say choose a second answer. And we'll give you a couple more seconds, and then Allison, if you can pull those up and go through the results real quick.
It looks like almost everybody has voted, so we will go ahead and close this on out and share the results are that those of us here today, 67% are experiencing CRM problems, and then the other 33% is here to avoid.
Okay, terrific. So a good distribution. We have about a third of one and 2/3 of the other. Thanks for participating in that poll. So there's some great news about CRM. Nucleus Research has done a couple of different studies and shown an average payback between $5.60 and $8.71 on average for every dollar spent. So in multiple studies, CRM tends to show a really strong potential ROI, 5 times or more the amount that was spent. So what I'd like to do is bring up another poll now, Allison, if you could, and ask our audience. Obviously, most people don't have hardcore ROI statistics, but just give your best guess as to what the ROI is you think your CRM solution has generated, assuming that you have one in place for your organization. What would you guess your CRM ROI has been? Is it not applicable? Maybe you've never tried it. Is it 0 or less? Would you put it as a fail in terms of generating a financial return? Has it been less than $1? So less than $1 return for every dollar spent? Probably still a fail, but maybe at least a smaller loss. And then we have low, medium, and high ranges for maybe 100 to 300% return, and on up to the high end there, where we said, hey, let's keep the mark low. Although Nucleus tells us the average is 560 to 871, let's make our high one below the low end of that scale and just say it was a 5x return on our investment that we achieved with that. So go ahead and fill that in if you can. If you're kind of multitasking and are looking away for a moment, we'd really ask you to step in and provide an answer to this one just so we can see where everybody feels like they stand. And obviously, again, we don't expect most of you to know the answer to this, but if you just make your best guess as to what you think your ROI has been, that would be great.
All righty, get just a couple more seconds here. It looks like almost everybody has voted. So I'm going to go ahead and close this and share these results with you. We're pretty split. So we have 33% of the crowd at a loss, 33% at low, and we do have 33% has seen a high ROI.
Okay, good. So we've seen people all over the scale with that. That's great. So on the other hand, and as some of you noted in your statistics for what your return has been, between 30 and 60% of these CRM projects do fail on average. Now that's quoted by us, but we'll have a lot of other research to back that up. One interesting thing is Nucleus Research, the one that gives us the quote for the 560 to 871, in one of their ROI studies, if you look at it, and you can download this, it's a white paper publicly available on the web, you look at the small print in a footnote, and it says, by the way, even with this average, about 30% of the companies that participated in this research failed to produce any ROI at all. So clearly, even when Nucleus is trying to look at it in a very positive light and say, let's do a study of the ROI, they still stumble across 30% of companies that try CRM actually fail to produce any ROI at all. And then if you measure adoption, or if you measure failure differently, you pretty quickly come to the conclusion that failure can be a lot of things besides just failure to produce an ROI, like tapping into a very small potential because a very small number of your team members have adopted it. So the typical rates are 30 to 60%. So let's take a closer look at those failure statistics. These are from the past 14 years, and only the bar on the far right is numbers that we produce within our organization based on our own research. A lot of different analysts, a lot of very different credible analysts in the marketplace have put failure rates between a really optimistic 20% and a really pessimistic 70%, and the truth probably lies somewhere between the two of those. Our own research showed 30% at the bare minimum, 60% on the high end, depending on your definition of failure. And again, the interesting thing here is this study in 2012 by Nucleus Research showed, showed that that even with a positive ROI, 30% failed, which is very interesting because that means that 30% failure rate is averaged into those ROI statistics. So if you can put the odds of success in your favor, you're likely to actually beat the ROI statistics that Nucleus calculated. Now, those failure rates don't even account for multiple failures. So if you look at the bottom, when we did our research, we asked people, how many times have you actually tried to implement CRM and failed? And over 47% had tried and failed 2 or more times. So the failure rates only look at, have you ever failed once? So if you look at multiple failures, that paints an even bleaker picture of what the failure rates could be. I just spent my last week with an organization that had already made 4 attempts to launch their CRM project. So again, factoring that in, the failure rates jump up really high. So we're going to come back to this multiple failure scenario in just a couple of slides here. Now, some people ask us, why focus on failure? You know, isn't that a glass half empty kind of mentality? Why not focus more on success than on failure? So to do that, let's look at a situation where the stakes were actually much higher than they are in CRM failure. Going all the way back to World War II, this is a picture of a B-17 Flying Fortress, 103 feet long, 25 tons, and absolutely critical to the Allies' strategy to turn the tide of the war. But they were running into a problem with these. Too many of them were getting shot down. They would leave England on their bombing runs, and too many of them weren't coming back home. In addition, of course, to the horrific toll on human life, they were also looking at this, realizing this is not sustainable. We're not going to be able to accomplish what we need to accomplish to turn the tide if we can't bring more of these planes back home. So how can we do that? Well, they could reinforce the armor on the hull of the plane, but they couldn't reinforce all the armor. They had to be selective. Too much reinforcement and the bomber would be too heavy to take off or to carry any payload, which obviously they needed to use to successfully complete their missions. So they took a look at the planes that came back, and they said, here's where the holes typically are in those planes. Let's reinforce those areas. Off went the planes, and the same number of planes got shot down as in previous runs. So they were in a fix. They were seeing the potential to influence the tide of the war slipping away from them, and their strategy for turning this around had failed. Well, along came a Jewish mathematician, Abraham Wald, who was a refugee from Poland, I believe it was, and he took another look at this and he said, you guys are actually measuring the wrong thing. You're measuring success, and what we don't know is how does success look different from failure. So ideally, we could look at the planes that had actually been shot down, but obviously we couldn't do that in this scenario. So he said, let's infer that those planes are getting shot in places where these planes are not getting shot. So we're going to learn from our failures instead of trying to learn from our successes. And so they reinforced the areas where they weren't getting shot, and lo and behold, more planes started coming back. So the lesson learned here is understanding our failures can be much more important than understanding our successes. And this even plays into how we get smarter about our CRM implementation once it's in place. So ideally, you're going to have someone on your senior project team who is focused on both success and failure and has experience with both and can bring that learning to the table. So if CRM is such a good investment, the question I would want to know is, why are these rates so high? The technology companies have done a tremendous amount of work over the 10-plus years that this research has been done to improve the technology and make it more bulletproof, more robust, much better at what it had been 10, 15 years ago. So how come the technology hasn't overcome the issues? Well, the answer to that is simple. It's not a technology problem, and technology, therefore, is not going to solve the problem either. Here we can see some statistics. Also from the research we did, we asked people, how many times have you implemented CRM? This was a head turner for us. What we were starting to base a strategy on was the fact that we found that 60% of the companies that were coming to us were telling us, we're in a state of recovery, we need help. So we said, okay, you know what, we're going to target that market because we're going to assume what we used to call the lesson of the second timers. If you tried it once and you failed, you've learned the lessons, and you're going to actually do it better now. And so we'll work with them. We'll have a great track record with these companies. When we pulled this research, we realized there's only a very small incremental difference in failure rates from the first to the second to the third and more times. Going back to our bomber analogy, people keep patching the wrong parts of the bombers. They're looking at people who are successfully doing CRM saying, let's do it the way they do it. They try that and they fail again, and they're left scratching their head saying, why haven't we learned anything? Why aren't we getting smarter? Why can't we get these returns that everybody else is seeing? The answer is they're patching the wrong parts of the bomber. Some cases in point, by the way, we've seen people switch from one CRM solution to the other, saying, well, solution X didn't work for us, solution Y will probably work better, and failed. And we've seen that go both ways between different systems. So it's not a matter of they didn't choose the right one. Or if we just get the latest upgrade, that's really going to help us be more successful. And lo and behold, the latest upgrade, which might be slick and have some great new features and benefits for them, still doesn't turn them around. So most companies assume selecting the right technology and maybe the right technology implement approach will mitigate the risk or resolve a failed project. And that's what our marketing had assumed too, but it was not the case. So they were patching the wrong parts of the plane. That's what happened in the story I started at the beginning of this session. Joe wanted new technology to patch the holes in his armor, and as the more influential leader of the larger line of business, Joe actually got what he wanted. And they didn't leave Jane alone with what was working. They told her, the whole company switching, you're going to need to switch as well. During that process, data was lost, frustration grew. Jane actually wound up leaving the company, not because of that, but just because people leave sometimes, and she had moved on. And their 50% failure rate jumped to 100% failure rate for their business overall. Patched the wrong holes, technology wasn't the problem, and it almost never is. So what is the problem? So let me see if I can get my feed here to update. Sorry, I'm trying a new piece of software for that, and I'll have to go back to something else after this session. So over time, we've kind of aggregated all of this into what we call the 7 deadly sins of CRM projects. So the truth is, there's a lot more than 7 deadly sins, but these are by far the most prevalent, and they summarize a lot of sub-issues. So if you address these and avoid these, you'll probably successfully deal with the others. Joe and his business unit had almost all 7 of these to varying degrees. So let me see if any of this sounds familiar to you. Joe himself wasn't committed to the project. He forced his people to rekey data into separate sales reports that he had in Excel rather than using his CRM tool to run his sales meetings. Number 2, they really didn't have any idea where they were going. They kind of thought of CRM as their boat for crossing the ocean on a voyage, but that the boat would run on autopilot. So they were lost at sea, and they had no idea where they were going and where they were trying to get with this. They didn't have a picture of what success with a CRM solution would look like. They had highly relational salespeople, great people skills, and they expected them to win sales based on that, but they had virtually no sales process in place at all. It wasn't a matter of not redesigning processes. It was a matter of not having a process to begin with and expecting a tool to actually help people who had no process in place at all. Data, number 4, was scattered all over the place. CRM was just one more place to put stuff. Number 5, with no long-term vision, it was almost impossible for these guys to have any project controls in place. They were in a very shoot-from-the-hip, knee-jerk reaction type of mode. The poor implementation partner was in reactionary mode themselves. They were consuming a lot of cash to rearrange the deck furniture on the Titanic, but it wasn't keeping the ship from going down. Number 6, they were using fire hydrant training. One day, and they expected non-technical sales reps to be perfectly competent in a new tool, and that was never going to work. And number 7, there was no governance in place to ensure that things would be improved, the whole team would be involved, and it would become more and more successful because they kept learning their lessons and getting smarter and smarter. So what's interesting to note in all 7 of these points, technology isn't here. It did not make the list at all. But you can summarize these 7 areas into just 2 or 3. So as we took a closer look at it and we started rolling it up, the pattern that emerged was 2 big kind of meta-level trends that were hitting a lot of the failed projects. Number 1 was a lack of clear planning, and number 2 was a lack of ongoing control, both for executing the project but also ongoing control to make sure that it was followed up with discipline. And the third one in there may not directly fit into planning or control, this idea of integration. It also played an important role. So how do we navigate that list of deadly sins? If we're stuck in a problem project, how can we dig our way out? Or if we're about to launch a new project, how do we avoid those landmines? So here's a high level, and we'll dig into this in a little more detail, 5-point recovery plan to think through. So if there's 5 things that companies do CRM well, do better than their competitors, they are, number 1, they're much better at listening in all sorts of creative ways, and they remember what was said. So a CRM system is largely all about listening to the customer, but you don't just do that by keying information in. You do that by bringing information in from other places. We'll dig into these a little deeper in a minute. The second thing they do better is they understand. So this is the data and the analytics step. They take all that knowledge that they gathered by listening, all that data, and they make it available for searching, to see individual stories, to aggregate those stories, to analyze thousands of customers, and to make better decisions. And connecting, that's where the action takes place. They have a process for more relevant and timely connections built on the listening and understanding that they've already done. The fourth one, which is very often overlooked, of these first four, it's the most often overlooked one, is they take the time to measure the results and continuously improve. And they do that as a group exercise. They engage the whole team in the process of knowing the customer and improving the results. So collectively, that's what we call the luck principle. So it makes it really easy to remember. How do we improve how we listen, how we understand, how we connect, and how we know? And how do we continuously strive to improve that even more? But there's a fifth piece of this too. It's what we call good luck. We're going to come back to this. It's kind of the secret ingredient. Those who have it are almost always more successful than those who don't. And those that don't usually don't even want to admit that it matters. Those that do often don't even realize that they're doing it right. So I'm not talking about luck like, having good fortune here. I'm talking about a process, a very specific way of engaging your team and engaging your customers. It's very difficult, but it's simple to look at. So we're going to come back to good luck in just a couple of slides. Remember, none of this is a quick fix. We try to make it really simple to digest, but it does take time and effort and focus and planning to pull all of this off. And that's why so many fail, because they want to kind of install something and go. And the reality is, rarely does that equate to a successful implementation. So on the first one, this idea of listening, how we kind of gather information about our customers. Now, before we dive into that one, what I want to ask is, we talked about the 7 deadly sins, but I'd like for Allison to pull up our third and I think final poll and ask you guys, what do you think the #1 reason is for CRM failure? We're only going to give you 5 or 6 options here, so you might say it's something else. Try to pick the best one, at least of the ones that you see here. And do this based on your experience, not asking for you to guess based on what's happening with others. I'm asking you to say, hey, based on what we've experienced, here's what we think it is. So you can see the options there. Do you think it has to do more with training? Do you think it's a lack of ongoing support to kind of continually improve the system and give users help? Do you think it's integration with other systems? Do you think it's the level of commitment that you get from the leadership team? Or do you think it's the technology and how it's configured? We're ruling technology itself out in terms of selecting the right software, because we know that that's really generally not the problem. There are a few exceptions to that, but for the most part, if you're choosing one of the main several that are available that get good reviews, then that's not going to be part of the issue. So if you haven't finished up yet, take a couple more seconds to choose one of those as an answer. And Allison, you don't need to pull the results up, but maybe if you can tell us what the #1 and 2 ones were, that would be great.
Sure. Right now, with not quite everybody having voted, we've got a tie between just 2 of these. It's 50-50 split between poor user training and lack of leadership commitment.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks, everybody who voted in that. And those are great answers, by the way. The reality is it's not a simple question to answer. There's a lot of different things. But when we asked the people we polled what they thought the #1 problem with CRM was, they said the #1 issue we experience that blocks good adoption is lack of integration, with 35% answering that, and they were given about 15 different things to choose from. 35% of them chose that as their #1 answer. What added some weight to that is another question that we asked, and you can see the results of that question up here on the screen. We asked how many systems does it take for a CRM user in your organization to get their job done? And the responses were telling. So when they just use CRM to do most of their work, and we're not talking about desktop systems like Outlook and Word and stuff like that. Obviously, everyone uses those. We're talking about primary systems like CRM and ERP and forecasting systems and all of that. When people said just one or CRM plus one system, satisfaction rates were very high, 87, 88%, very close to one another. As soon as we said a second system in addition to CRM or more, satisfaction rates dropped off precipitously. And our survey only had 150 respondents, so we couldn't break it down any further without losing some statistical significance. But the lesson was clear. People who had, as a separate question, answered how satisfied am I with our CRM, and then later answered how many systems do I have to use to get my job done, pretty much agreed that the more systems I've got to use to get my job done, the less satisfied I am with our CRM system. And that's obviously going to have a pretty dramatic impact on driving adoption. So the more places someone has to go in order to hear the customer, the more their satisfaction drops. So let's talk about listening and how it figures into that a little bit in a little more detail. CRM is a platform for listening. So the first thing to think about is, are your people using it for that? Do they listen to relevant, important things and capture that into CRM? Do they clutter it up with irrelevant things that makes it harder for everyone to find what they're looking for because maybe management wants a report of every email that's sent so they can get a count of those, and now everybody has to go search through a bunch of useless emails to find out 1 out of 100 that actually has meaningful information in it. Is it easy to find what you're looking for? And is your revenue generation team, meaning sales, marketing, inside, outside sales, all of those, using different systems so that they can't hear what other people have captured? So what we run into oftentimes is a company says, we're going to choose this CRM solution for our field sales group. Inside sales uses ERP to do their job, and marketing uses some other system, and maybe there's other people out there who are customer-facing who use yet a different set of systems. And when you start to have that, you can't collaborate. You can only collaborate within one funneled system, especially if you haven't integrated those. So so look at that, and then does your CRM system contain information you've already gathered? So more than just using it to listen, you've already listened to your customers. You've captured a lot of information about your customers, but for many organizations, that other information is locked away from the people who face the customer every day in other systems that either they don't have access to or it's extra steps to get access to it. So one thing we know from experience again and again is past buying behavior is always the greatest predictor of future buying behavior. So in other words, what has someone bought from us before? What have we invoiced them before that they've paid us for? That's going to tell a salesperson more about what a customer is likely to do than any amount of what a customer tells them they think they're going to do. So having that information at their fingertips means they're going to make better decisions, and they're probably going to reach out to customers that makes more sense to be talking to. So that requires integration. So let's talk about that for 1 minute. We did a piece of research unrelated to this. One of our clients, a pretty large manufacturer, had us go talk to some of their distributors, one of which had actually set up a CRM system, and they'd actually kind of done a presentation on a public format, and so this manufacturer said, go talk to them. They seem to be doing something right. They really like what they've got. So we went and talked to them, and they said, look, it hasn't always been this way. We've had this system for a long time, and it took us a long time to get it right. And the actual quote of what they gave us was, after 7 years, the turning point was when we finally migrated our CRM users entirely off of ERP and gave them just one system. So that was a VP from the distribution company that gave that to us. So integration is really important. Now, we're not fans of, if you're not doing CRM yet, starting by integrating right away, because that's usually a complicated and time-consuming and expensive step. You can prove out the value without doing integration, but once you've proven the value, one of the next steps you should take is get this integrated with other systems to drive up satisfaction and make people more productive with it and to give them better information. The other thing to think about with this that we see almost no one doing is, in addition to integration, you should consider what we call migration and elimination. What I mean by that is there are CRM systems these days. We work with Salesforce and Dynamics CRM, full disclosure. There are other ones that work well too, but both of those systems allow a tremendous amount of configurability and flexibility. So some of those legacy applications that you've got out there can often be eliminated and moved into the CRM application, or process out of something and move it into CRM. So let me give you some real examples of that. In one case, an organization was using a custom-made forecasting system. So their sales team had to do forecasts, and they had to update them every month. And in manufacturing, that's normal. You've got kind of forecasts that are separate from pipeline, and so people manage those in two discrete places. So as we looked at that pretty closely with them, we said, look, this aligns with customers, and it's pretty easy to set this up inside the system to mimic what you've already done and not require your folks to have to go re-enter this data in multiple different systems or just use multiple different systems to manage their life as a salesperson. So that was a case of elimination. We migrated that application over to CRM. We could completely eliminate it. Less burden for IT to worry about, but more importantly, better adoption, more satisfaction for the salespeople that had to use CRM every day. In another case, we had a client who was using their ERP system, and this is also very, very typical. for quoting and ordering. And of course, it makes sense to use your ERP system for invoicing. And there's a big gray area between should that be in CRM or should that be in ERP. But in their case, it was causing a great divide. Their salespeople could hardly get any work done at all because they couldn't get into ERP. They just didn't have the time to learn all the subtleties of doing it. So that was purely an inside sales role. So it put a lot of extra burden on inside sales. Field sales couldn't see what was going on in there, and now inside sales was toggling back and forth between two systems. Field sales could never see what they wanted inside of CRM anyway, so they practically never used it. By taking that particular functionality out of ERP and saying, hey, we're going to let inside and outside sales be able to do quotes and orders directly inside of the CRM system, and then we'll integrate that with ERP so that it can continue the order processing process and handle the invoicing process. That worked much better for them. So ask yourself, in the broadest definition of listening, are you really listening to your customers? The U in luck, understand. So IBM did some research. They split the business world into two groups. Those industries, those organizations who underperform and those who outperform the standard, the baseline in each of their industries. They had two groups, the underperformers and the overperformers, and they found a massive gap in three areas that have to do with data. First of all, access to data. Outperformers are 108% better at setting up access to data than are the underperformers. So they know how to jockey data around and make it accessible throughout the organization. Outperformers are also 108% better, same gap, at drawing insights from the data. So doing the analytics and saying, hey, here's some insightful new things that might be counterintuitive that help us to make better decisions. And the third thing that outperformers do better is they translate the data into better decisions, actually turn it into results. So outperformers show an 84% gap there. So that's what understanding is all about. If listening is all about generating and having access to the right data, understanding is all about making it available across the organization for better decision making. And we break that out into 4 different groups. So separate research published in Harvard Business Review shows the average worker spends about 20% of their time a day each week searching for information they need to get their job done. So if you go through the math, in a 1,000-person company with an average salary of $50,000 a year, that's $10 million spent on trying to find stuff. And where do people go to look when they're looking for stuff? They usually go ask coworkers and take up their time also in the search process. So it's a huge time sink, especially in information-rich types of industries. So how do we translate all of those statistics into action? Here's the 4 ways we do it. We focus on this idea of little data. So you heard a lot of talk about big data. No one spends much time talking about little data anymore because it's not sexy at the moment. It doesn't sound as critical, but it actually is more critical than big data. This is your CRM system. But for it to have everything it needs, remember how to listen. You've got to get that little data taken care of, and that's partly a matter of governance and data quality that's coming into the CRM system directly from users. That's partly a factor of how big data, how other systems in the organization are feeding those little data views. Little data, if you will, is this idea of looking at the story of one person at a time, being able to see something about one customer so you can have a better conversation, you can make better decisions, you can serve them better, you can drive buying behavior more effectively. Medium data is what little data rolls up into. So this is the data that managers typically use to help manage the folks who are using little data systems. So managers are managing frontlines people. The frontlines people are accessing one record at a time, learning one customer story. Managers can access dashboards and aggregates to help understand what's going on within their division. And those frontline users also use medium data to do things like manage their day and target who they're going to talk to next and those kinds of things. Big data, of course, is the one where all the attention is. So if CRM and other little data systems aren't generating quality data, big data isn't going to produce any insight for you. But a lot of exciting things can happen with big data. Great reporting systems and dashboards, and certain organizations can do machine-based learning and predictive modeling and those kinds of things if the big data is of a quality and update frequency that favors that. And then the 4th area is search. So this is where you start to chip away at that 20% of the time your team spends looking for information. Make sure it's set up well so that they can search to find what they're looking for. Search isn't just a matter of having a feature and a piece of software. Most of them have that now. It's still a matter of governance, making sure that the right data is coming into the system, the wrong data is getting cleaned out, so it's more efficient for people to find what they're looking for. So the question to ask yourself when you think about how am I understanding my customers is, are you distributing data to everyone who needs it in order to make decisions about customers, and are you doing it in the format that they need, little, medium, big data, and how the data gets shared across and between those systems. Connecting. So this is where the action is. This is where everybody kind of wants to jump directly to, skipping the first two steps if they can. And according to the Gallup organization, the action's pretty good. A potential 240% boost in performance-related outcomes if you do a good job of connecting. But what really is connecting? So executives tend to say, when we're early on in projects with them, and this might sound familiar to you, if the tool is good enough, my team will use it to create better connections. Or I want this to be so good that my team's just going to want to use it. So we have found that those statements are true approximately 0% of the time. Virtually never will we run into an organization where you'll say, we gave our folks a system and it was so good that after a little bit of training they just decided to use it on their own because it so obviously helped them. And it can very obviously help people, but habits are hard to change. And more importantly, connections aren't formed based on just relationship people. This is why you see inside sales taking such a big bite of the more traditional field-based sales type of operation, because inside sales teams generally are very good not only at technology, but at following, institutionalizing, and improving on a process. And field sales reps have a more difficult time with this. But what's absolutely clear and absolutely true is connecting is about a process. Why is that so important? Because soft skills alone don't scale. All you can do to cover soft skills is hire more people with the soft skills. You can't scale that. If everyone is using CRM differently, you have no idea how to improve the process. It's completely individualized. And because your people are learning lessons about what works and what doesn't, and process is what allows you to institutionalize. If every single person has to go through the learning curve of what works and what doesn't in your selling scenario, you're having a huge efficiency problem. But process helps you institutionalize those, so when you add a new salesperson, yes, they still need the soft skills, but they can also benefit from all the years of lessons that everyone else has learned by plugging into the process that's already in place. So when you think about connecting, think about, do you have a process at all, and has it been institutionalized well in CRM, and do you have a way to take it seriously, monitor it, make sure it's followed, and make sure that it's improved? So no is the last of the luck portion of this. Remember our bomber? No is about our bombers. Knowing is about measuring our failures. It's always improving. It's really hard because understanding failure means being vulnerable and humble, and it's not something done by a few isolated analysts. It's done together as a team. So one thing you may have overlooked on the previous slide, remember we talked about if you can engage, you can get a great benefit. But if you look closely at the quote on that slide, it didn't just say engage customers, it says engage employees and customers. And CRM is actually as much about engaging employees as it is about engaging customers. At the end of the day, it's really a collaboration system. It's a way to work together better within your organization to serve the people that are outside of your organization. So many organizations that want to be successful in engaging customers never really understand how to engage their own employees. Here's a few facts to know about those results. Companies with the highest levels of operating profit, service, and sales performance are 2.8 times more likely to have clearly defined business metrics. That's what knowing is all about, being able to measure our success, have metrics that tell us what's the score. 8% to 11% faster growth rates are experienced by highly participatory companies. So companies that draw people in to participate together have a much faster growth rate than those that are more just purely top-down driven. So how do you do this? How do you run this know process? First of all, engage employees throughout the process, both at the earliest stages of planning your CRM project, but also on an ongoing basis. So this is critical, not just planning CRM, but on developing your overall business growth plan and on engaging around how are we actually running the revenue generation process. One of the things we've come to realize over time is there's a time and a place for having sort of a CRM leadership structure and that kind of thing. But what's much more important to the long-term success of CRM is having an ongoing structure around constantly planning the revenue generation process, sales, marketing, customer service, and all the customer-related, customer-facing functions. And CRM is just the tool that serves the team that's doing that. And everybody involved in those processes should be involved in meetings and collaboration around that. You need to share the numbers with them. The second point, no one wants to play a game if they never get to know what the score is. So people need to know what the score is and know how to translate and understand the numbers. And those numbers are not just CRM numbers. Those are top-line numbers for an organization. We have been floored at finding that companies are able to train their employees to even read their own balance sheets and P&L types of statements, which may scare some of you, but when you get people involved in the game at that level, they get involved and interested in actually improving whatever scores it is you're sharing with them. Expect to constantly be improving. Not only CRM, but the knowledge you get out of your CRM system should suggest ways you need to improve your people, your products, and your processes. And a fourth one that people often overlook is celebrate. And don't just kind of celebrate seat of the pants when something good happens. Have a structured way of identifying wins, working towards wins together, and when you achieve those wins, celebrate as a team. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be lavish. It has to be a way that your team comes together and says, when we win together. So yes, there needs to be focus on individual commissions and those kinds of things, but you also need to drive home the fact that this is about winning together. So we're going to set goals, and if we don't make them, we don't have the celebration. And if we do make them, we all get to celebrate achieving those goals together. And it puts a healthy sense of balance into the team about everybody pulling their weight to get to the number that everyone's working for together. So ask yourself, since it's all about collaboration and well thought out meetings, are you meeting together regularly? Do your managers use CRM to run those meetings? Do your executives rely on CRM to produce key numbers for running the business? Does your team actually look forward to those meetings because it actually gives them a voice? They're not just listening to someone talk up front. They're not getting just beat up over whether they did a good job or not. They're actually participating and influencing the decisions the company is making to make it a better place to work. People are buying into what's going on all around them. We've actually developed a process we use internally, and we've deployed it to some clients now that we call Luck Score. That's just for this. It's a structured way of meeting, setting goals, celebrating the goals, and refining the business as we go forward. Something I encourage everybody to do. So now our secret ingredient, this idea of good luck. So even after we developed the luck principle, which was a number of years ago that we first candidly kind of stumbled onto it as we were kind of trying to find a simple way to talk about engaging customers and employees, we were frustrated because there still seemed to be another significant block of organizations that didn't quite seem to fit the mold. Most that applied luck seemed to have a lot of improvement, but some succeeded even though they didn't seem to practice luck as well as some of the others that weren't. And some were failing even though they seemed to embrace the core of luck pretty well and had a good process for it in place, but they still weren't getting the traction we expected them to have. And it was an intangible something we couldn't quite put our finger on. Then it hit us. We're working with a specific client. They just had a mission hung on their wall, and their customer was right in the middle of that mission statement. Their employees, suppliers, and even their customers' customers were all something that they talked about in their mission of being passionately engaged in. So we wondered if that played a role. So the next thing we did was we started to look back at other successes and failures, and the trend became a little clearer. And we found some supporting research that kind of backed up that hypothesis. So the first thing is there's a book, The Culture Cycle, and we would see from that there is a tremendous difference in organizations' effectiveness based on their culture. Something still wasn't quite connecting, but that kind of told a good story. Then a paper published by MIT and Northwestern University graduate students that examined data from an organization called Great Place to Work revealed that it isn't about just having a mission, it's about having a culture, and that's what brought it all together. In essence, what their research said was it's not about having a written mission, it's about actually having a mission. It's not about talking about purpose, it's actually running the business with purpose. Their research essentially said if people put something in writing that says our company is going to have a lot of integrity, obviously they don't do it quite that simply, and it had no impact at all on the results the company created. But if employees described the company as a company that operated with integrity, it made a tremendous difference in how the company was run. And that's when all the pieces came together. It's about the sense of purpose. It's about culture, mission, and those things generally need to align with people to get it to work well. So missions that are purely financially focused, while critical, there's a lot more to it than that. It's a balance of serving people, but also remaining true to your mission. If you want to read more on this at an individual level, a guy who wrote a great book on this general topic is named Adam Grant, in his book Give and Take. It shows us that the most successful individuals are givers, not takers and not even matchers, but there's a risk because the least successful individuals are also givers. So just saying we're going to be people-oriented does not mean you're going to be more successful. It actually is probably going to differentiate the least and most successful companies. The givers who passionately pursue their mission while making time to also give to those who are in need, to those around them, who are the most successful. So in other words, they're very true to their mission, but they also strategically focus on people. That's what we believe is also true of companies. Although Grant's book was focused on people, our experience is that's very true of companies. So let's put it really simply. If luck is what you do, you're going to experience some success. We certainly have seen the trends that organizations do that well and get methodical about following those 4 steps as a process, do improve their odds of connecting with customers and successfully embracing CRM. But if luck is what you are, not just what you do, but it's part of the fabric of the personality of your business, you're going to experience greater success, and it's going to be sustained and continue to grow over a long period of time. A tough thing to influence for sure, and we're going to come back to that in a minute. Not so easy to just say, let's go change the culture in any position in the company, but it is possible to make incremental gains. So luck isn't a one-shot deal. As we look through that 5-point plan, it's not as simple as just saying, okay, I'm going to improve each of these 5 things, and then I'm going to be done and move on. It's an ongoing process. You don't do it all at once, and you try to keep progress in each area aligned with the others. So if you think of it as a wheel, and this little wheel will be downloadable via the Twitter feed here in a few minutes. If you think of it as a wheel, if you're doing great in one area but poorly in another, then the wheel isn't round anymore, and the business isn't going to run well. The wheel's going to be wobbly, and things are going to fall apart. So, for example, let's say you look at Listen and you say, you know, we don't do a very good job with listening. Our systems aren't integrated. People have to use multiple systems. There's a lot of junk inside of CRM. We're going to give ourselves a real low mark on that one. And I was hoping I could use inking on this, but I won't be able to, so I'll just kind of hypothetically talk about it. Then if you look at Understand and you say, you know, we're doing okay. We've got a big data system there. We're going to give ourselves a 5. We're not doing everything we should, but we're pretty well off on that now. Connecting. Do we have a good process? Yeah, we've got a great process. It's still manual. Maybe it's not fully represented inside of CRM yet, but we've got a process-driven team, and we follow that closely. So let's give ourselves a 7 or maybe even an 8 there. And then no. Do we meet regularly? Does everyone have a voice? Are we improving constantly? Are we giving everyone a chance to help us improve what we're doing? Are we celebrating together based on mutual victories? And let's say not too great there. Maybe we have some annual things but we can do better. We'll give ourselves a 3. And then good luck. Maybe we've got a great mission. We're very good culture. We're driven well by people. So we'll give ourselves a 7, 8, maybe even a 9 there. So if I could ink all of this on the way I'm displaying this, you'd see a very lopsided wheel that looks flat on one side and big on the other. So what that tells you is there's always room to improve everything. But as I look at that, I would say listen and know are where I'm going to focus my time first, because that's where you can bring a wheel back into balance. I don't need to get a better sense of good luck, and I don't need to get better big data right now, because those things are doing pretty well. I need to get the other areas to catch up, and then I can continuously improve all of those to keep the wheel nice and round. So if you remember, coming back to an earlier point, we talked about planning and control being critical to success overall. So if we back up and look at that and say, all right, let's take luck and say, what is our process for actually moving forward with all of this, given everything I've learned today? We think it's about a 5-point plan, again, as we look at that. First of all, think about a roadmap. CRM is like a ship heading out to sea. It doesn't tell you where to go. You need to make that decision before you get on board. So know what success looks like. We suggest a minimum of a 2-year plan, no more than a 5-year plan, but somewhere in that range to start to say we would have a clear definition of success, a clear roadmap with milestones, and we want to have lots of opportunities for course correction, which brings us into sprints. Sprints is this idea of having a very agile way that you implement your project. So you don't want to have a roadmap that's so rigorous that you have detailed requirements for 5 years documented, because by the time you do all of that, the world will have changed and it won't be relevant anymore. You want to have a general roadmap with milestones, and then as you execute, you want to have small projects and those broken down into 30 to 60-day sprints that gives you lots of opportunity for doing something, adding value, and also course correction. And that's the most important part of sprints, is a course correction piece. So you can constantly be looking at it saying, either the world has changed, we need to change course a little bit, or now that our people are using the CRM tool or have changed how they're using the CRM tool, they have a new vision of how it should work, and we're going to make a small course correction. So think of it this way. If you lay out a detailed roadmap up front to go from Boston to London, and you're off by just a few degrees, it won't feel that bad at the beginning. But in the end, you're going to wind up at the North Pole. But if you're off by a few degrees and you stop at 10% landmark milestones all along the way, you're going to continue correcting your course before you get too far off of that course. So one of our folks in the study we did, which is downloadable by the way, said to us, if I had it to do over again, I'd start by developing a plan, a clear vision, before even starting on requirements. We agree. We think that's a great way to start. Number 3 is collaborate. So work together on your CRM project. The folks that I just met with last week that I said were on their 4th try, they're a U.S.-based company. They're a U.S.-based subsidiary of a European-owned company, and we saw them making some of the classical mistakes that others have made before, where literally someone comes and talks to them a little bit, they disappear for a long time, they show up, they fire hose blast them with a day of training, and they disappear again. And people are left with A, not fully understanding the system, B, not buying into it, and C, never having really given them a clear set of what it is that they want to get done. So work together. CRM is about working together. Ultimately, it should be about working together all throughout the process. Number 4, measure. Nobody wants to play a game if they don't know the score, as we said. So make sure that as you roll out your CRM system, it's actually a way where you can keep score with the things that matter. Not every metric needs to be inside of CRM. That's one thing that's a little bit of a misconception. Some measurements are very qualitative. So we see a lot of people use sort of a note-taking system integrated with their CRM system so they can do lessons learned that are much more subjective, but that helps to drive process improvements. Do work on, with those metrics, getting each C-level executive in your organization to value at least one critical metric that they want to see at least monthly and ideally weekly out of the CRM system. Nothing drives behavior like a CEO or CFO saying, hey, where's this critical number I need for my report? Or this number wasn't accurate last month. What happened? That starts to change behavior. And the 5th one is improve. So go in expecting to always be improving. The way one of our clients put it to us is, my management feels like this CRM project was a bookshelf. I put it together, I put some books on it, now I need to be moving on to the next thing. And what they don't realize is we're always learning, always getting smarter, and I always need to be fine-tuning this system, and I need to get them to appreciate that. And that's a problem that a lot of organizations have. CRM is unlike a lot of other projects out there. First of all, that it's not really an IT project. Yes, there's a piece of technology behind the scenes, but it has more to do with business process that's supported with some good IT applications. So go in with your eyes wide open and expect to always be improving it. And the model for improvement is different for different companies, so decide what model is right for you. We've got a lot of other resources out there. There's a lot of them listed right here on this slide. So if you want to learn more, you can take a look at these. Side by side is we're actually going to be doing a side-by-side demo of Salesforce and Dynamics CRM, a very simple, high-level one, just focused on the sales function and the basic functionality. But if you're at a place where you're saying, hey, we're thinking about making a selection, that's a good one to take a look at. If you're already on Dynamics, we have another one coming up, which is why upgrade from CRM 2011. So if some of you are on that and you want to see what the new things are that might be a compelling reason why you should move to the latest version, come join us for that one. You can download the detailed findings from the study that we shared a lot of statistics from. Soon we're going to have a self-assessment. So if you're kind of in a state of, gosh, I don't know how we're doing, I'd like to have my own report card, and you want to get something a little more sophisticated than that luck wheel that I shared earlier, we're going to have the downloadable tool you can print out, fill out yourself, and kind of give yourself some things to focus on. Not on here and by request only via email, and you'll see an email address on the next slide. We have an 8-part email series for salespeople. So one of the things we see is salespeople are kind of overwhelmed oftentimes, feeling like CRM needs to be this big complicated thing. We have an 8-part series. It's very simple, step by step. It's not based on a particular piece of software. It's just a basic block and tackle of, use it to manage contacts. Now use it to manage your pipeline. Things like that. Very short, 1 or 2 screen emails that they can get every couple of weeks. It kind of keeps them moving forward. If you want to request an executive briefing, if you think you might be in a failure state and you'd like a tailored briefing to share with your executive team, contact us for that. And of course, we have a lot of services and solutions. So if you're looking for professional help, we're here to help you with that as well. There's a lot of other articles out there on CRM adoption, integration, other concepts on our blog site. You can find that at blogs.c5insight.com. So thank you, everybody, for coming today. We're right up against our timeline, but I'm going to spend a couple more minutes with Allison answering any questions that might have come up. But if you do need to jump, we certainly understand. Please take a couple of minutes to fill out the survey that should pop up after you exit. We really, really benefit a lot from your feedback. That's one way we listen to you. Thank you again for coming, and have a great day.